When Formula E was launched, it was seen by many as an electric knockoff of F1. To set themselves apart, Formula E have tried to come up with different innovations in their short history. And one of these has been Attack Mode, introduced in the 5th season in 2018 along with the Gen 2 cars. The primary aim of this Attack Mode was to add unpredictability to the races and keep things exciting. The Attack Mode has now been around for over 3 completed seasons, and the big question is, has Attack Mode worked? To answer that, we must first explain exactly what is Attack Mode. The short answer is, drivers are given a series of power boosts during the race to use when they see fit. To further explain Attack Mode, consider this. Almost all single-seater racing series suffer from the same problem these days, lack of overtaking. This problem gets compounded in championships like Formula E, where the tracks are narrow and the cars are wide. Attack Mode was introduced to somewhat alleviate this by adding a strategic element to races, as Formula E no longer needed a car swap mid-race with the introduction of the Gen 2 cars. Attack Mode is activated by driving through a specific area of the racetrack called the activation zone. The exact location of the activation zone varies from circuit to circuit and is determined by the race organizers. The catch here is that these activation zones are off the racing line, which means that drivers will initially lose time as they get off the racing line to go through it. When a driver wishes to enter an activation zone, they need to press a button on their steering wheel. There are 3 timing loops inside the activation zone that detect if a car has gone through. A driver must go through all 3 loops to activate Attack Mode. Once activated, the car's power output is increased for a predetermined amount of time by 50 kilowatts. The total minute allowance for Attack Mode is always changing, but most recently it was set to a total of 8 minutes per race. Now, one more important note to consider is that drivers can actually be penalised for not using Attack Mode the delegated 2 times per race. More on this later. Overall, drivers and teams must carefully strategize when and how to utilize these attack modes to gain an advantage while considering factors like the track layout, race position, and the behavior of their competitors. As an example, let's take a look at Max Günther, who has mastered the skill of attack mode strategy. Günther delivered possibly one of the best races in Formula E history during the 6th season in Santiago. He became the youngest race winner in Formula E, and part of the reason why he beat out drivers with much more experience was his brilliance when it came to using the attack mode. And to top that, he did it once more just recently in Jakarta. Günther broke the pole sitter's curse by utilizing his attack modes at just the right time, which allowed him to keep his lead and command a dominating win. Races become much more dynamic and unpredictable through attack mode. Drivers can make bold moves and attempt overtakes that they might not have been able to execute without the power boost. This increases the chances of position changes and exciting battles on the track, leading to thrilling race moments and keeping spectators on the edge of their seats. Attack mode also aligns with the core principles of Formula E, which is to promote energy efficiency and sustainable racing. The temporary power increase is offset by the requirement for drivers to conserve energy during other parts of the race to compensate for the boost. This aspect encourages drivers to manage their energy consumption strategically. Now, what are some criticisms of attack mode? Well, just like the drag reduction system or DRS in F1, there are many who feel that attack mode in Formula E is artificial and contrived. Artificially increasing the power output during a race can disrupt the natural flow of competition and can detract from the purity of racing. This was evident in the very first race of the 5th season in Saudi Arabia, the first race ever to feature attack mode. Jose Maria Lopez failed twice to activate attack mode and fell from 2nd to 5th place for almost no reason. This would not be the last time this would happen either. Drivers would keep missing the timing loops narrowly and lose more time than they could have gained. Another problem with this is the drivers don't always get penalised in a similar way when they do miss the activation zones. While Lopez lost 3 positions in the previous example, there have been cases where the driver hasn't been impeded that much, as was the case with Lucas Di Grassi when he too missed activating the attack zone twice during the Sanya E-Prix in China for the same reason, but didn't lose out as much as Lopez did. Inconsistent execution has been the biggest problem with attack mode. Issues such as timing glitches, problems with activation zones, or inconsistencies in the duration of the power boost have occurred, leading to confusion and unfairness in certain races. Stoffel Vandoorne at the De Ruyter E-Prix second race had a malfunctioning dashboard which prevented him from activating attack mode, which led to a 24-second penalty. We should also note that attack mode strategies have become somewhat predictable over time at a lot of the tracks. As team and drivers gain experience with the feature, they tend to adopt similar approaches, leading to less unpredictability and potentially reducing the strategic intrigue that attack mode was intended to create. Lastly, critics suggest that the presence of attack mode can shift the focus of the race away from pure racing skills and instead place more emphasis on strategic calculations. This could potentially divert attention from driver skill and on-track battles. It's important to note that these criticisms reflect certain perspectives and not everyone may share the same concerns. Formula E is still very young and they're constantly trying to refine and adapt attack mode based on driver, team and fan feedback, which is great. Which brings us back to our original question: has attack mode worked? Well, the best people to answer this would be the drivers themselves. Most of them seem to be okay about it, but there are times they're critical of it as well. Most of these criticisms are aimed at the location of the timing zones, visibility problems, and lack of variability or too much variability. However, for the most part, the current drivers and fans seem positive about it. To sum things up, attack mode has worked for the most part, as it had led to races staying interesting from the start to the finish. But we're not yet completely convinced that attack mode is working the way it was designed to work, at least not in its current stage of development. Possibly, with the addition of fast charging pit stops, this could change. For now though, attack mode does keep drivers and fans on their toes throughout the race. It may have some rough edges, but it's relatively fair most of the time. It's exciting and it's been constantly improved upon. All qualities that are becoming increasingly rare in racing innovations elsewhere, which is why attack mode can be considered a success story.